Today I'd like to illustrate a concept more than an exercise. We're going to use the front lateral raise as our demonstrative exercise, but this applies to anything. Most of the joints in the limbs of the body are rotary. They go around something. There's a point there's an axis of rotation, and then the bone rotates around that. And lots of things are, let's just put it this way, most of the motions that your joints make, although they seem like they're going from one place to another in a straight line, the joint itself is real circular. All the motions of the body are round. Even the bicep goes around the elbow joint, and that motion is an arc. It's circular. So we're going to take that knowledge and apply it to the shoulder. And what I want to illustrate is that in that arc of motion, so Gary, give me your hand, as that arc of motion for the front raise goes around, and it goes around like this, there's a point in that motion that is the hardest. And everybody knows what it is. It's the sticking point. It's the hardest point in the arc of motion. So at the beginning of this, if he had a dumbbell, and I'll provide him with one, at the beginning of this motion, down at the bottom, right now, the dumbbell or the weight is directly under the axis of rotation, which is his shoulder, generally, right? And so at this point, down here, that's not hard to move around down there. He could have a 100-pound dumbbell and move it that far. So the first 3 or 4 inches of this motion are not very hard to the muscle that we're training, the anterior deltoid in this case. So this is pretty ineffectual down here. Even if you have hundreds of pounds, it's just swinging from, the point, like a swing on a swing set. And as he goes up, this starts to get hard. And when this is the furthest from this, when the distance between the two in vertical line, remember when we started out, the weight, I'm going to hold that for you, Gary, so you don't get tired. The weight was hanging below the axis of rotation. Now it's way out here. And so this is the point at this angle that we have that's going to be the hardest. And as that arc comes back, now the weight is again in line directly in relation to gravity with the axis of rotation. So this is easy. He can hold that there for quite some time. So where this exercise is effective, I'll take the dumbbell and just, this exercise would be effective at this angle from about there to about there. It starts to get easy after that, and as he goes down, it starts to get easy down here. So it goes, slowly move your arm through the range, Gary. Start at the bottom again. All right, and so right here it's easy, 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 starting to get hard, getting harder, harder still. Now it's at its hardest. Now it starts to get easier and easier and easier and easier again. Rest. So the effective training of that would be from there to there. Now let's contrast that. So that would be, if I was standing here, that'd be from about here to here. Let's contrast that. We're going to move the angle up quite a bit up. So now we move Gary up to a more upright position just by changing the angle of this bench, which is effectively changing the angle of his torso. So again, if the weight is hanging down, there's no work down there. And then as it comes up, this will be the hardest point. From about here to about here is the effective motion, the effective range of training. And then again, it's going to get easy. But these two angles, rest for a second, Gary, are not the same place in which it was hardest. When he was laid down flatter, that hardest point came earlier in the motion in relation to his body. It came about here. That was real hard because he was leaning back, remember? And now this one, where he's more straight up and down, that happens out here with about a 90-degree angle. So as we change the effective angles between the long axis of his body and the joint that's moving, or the bone that's moving, in relation to gravity, we can effectively train, we can make the effective range of training happen either earlier or later. If I were to sit him up even straighter, now that effective range, now that hardest point and that little area around it is going to happen even later in the total arc. Remember when he was laid down, it happened a lot easier. It happened a lot earlier, I meant to say. So now it happens even later. And if we could lay him on a bench the other way, Gary, stand up for a moment and lay forward on this. Now you could even stand, Gary. Go ahead and just stand. And just lay your chest on here, standing. So now let your arm hang down. So now as he comes up, 90 degrees isn't so hard for him anymore, 90 degrees to his body. But now, since he's angled the opposite direction, now right about here. And look how high that is if he were standing up. Just stand up and keep your arm at the same angle. That's where that would happen. If he just did these standing, this would be where it's hardest. If he starts to lay back in a decline, that hardest point happens earlier and earlier and earlier. And if you're laying down flat, it happens real early in the range of motion. So, and we could make this even higher. If I move this down and he lays on here, he can do these front raises with the dumbbell. And now, about right there is where the hardest point's going to be. Now stand up, Gary, now. And that's even higher in this arc of motion. Sit down for a second, Gary, and rest. So what we've done here is just by changing the angles of our body, we changed the hardest place that the muscle's going to get trained in the range of motion. So if I told you to train a muscle from only here to here, or let's take the bicep. If I said only train your bicep from straight to about 70 degrees and back and forth and back and forth, and only train there, would you expect to get any strength up in this part of the motion where we're past 90? You shouldn't expect to get stronger or developed where you don't train. It's just like going down in a squat. If you only train the top of the squat, if you get too low, you know there's no strength down there because you didn't go through that range of motion with an effective load. So what we're doing here is we're changing the angle of the body to affect. Let me move this down even further, Gary. In fact, I'll move it down as far as it can go. Almost. So if Gary trains his front raises, go ahead and put your arm, move your leg in. Good. And you're going to train, where's the hardest part going to happen? It's going to happen here. Now, if he leans back a little bit, it's still going to happen at this point, but that's down lower than it was here. That is lower than here. And if he leans forward, look how late in the range of motion it happens. And as he leans back, that still happens at horizontal to the earth. As he lays back, go ahead and lay back all the way. That hardest point happens earlier and earlier and earlier in the motion. Rest. So if you want to train a muscle like the shoulder, which has an enormous range of motion, you can train it just by taking what you get, or you can be a little bit more clever than that, and you can get what you want. You can train it in the range of motion that is most effective for you or where you have a weak spot. So if somebody always trains their front like this, they're going to be pretty strong from here to here. But back here, they're not going to be very strong because there's no load down there. So if they haven't laid down, stand up for a second, Gary, and I know that about people, then I can, if I'm in a fight with Gary, I don't want to him get his arms up here where he's strong. I'm going to keep him down where he's weak. He's going to have a harder time moving against me down here than up through here where he's more strong. And that's important for wrestling and combat sports and all kinds of things. So you have to be you have to do an analysis on your sport and where you want developed. And you can, if you want, you can adapt your training on a simple exercise like front dumbbell raises to give you more of what you want, to get stronger in a place that you want. And if you want strength all the way through the motion, then you can rotate your training so that you get trained in every part of the motion. So that's the basic concept. I hope that made sense. Please don't be shy in giving me comments if this wasn't, and I'll do another video that explains it a little clearer if this was not. So I appreciate you listening. Thank you.